welcome all attendees, welcome panelists. Happy you made it. Let me introduce the topic of today's webinar. There will be two webinars today and March 28th. Today it's all about localization, why you need it, and how to start. We have a beautiful panel here. So let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Janis. I've been with Phrase for almost 6 years, but today it's not about me, but about the experts we invited. So Tobias, would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Janis. Tobias Scherf, Director of Solutions at Phrase. I've been with Phrase now for 3 years. And in the industry, nearly 23 at this time, and enjoy working with many professionals like Janis and Radibor, as well as Philip here. Thank you, and I'll pass off to Radibor.
Hello, everybody. I'm Radibor. I'm co-founder of Actum Digital Agency, and since the foundation of the company, it's 25 years ago. I have been working on large or at least big international digital projects for companies like Allianz, BMW, and others. So over the years, let's say, acquire some experience with deep experience with building webs, applications, and so on. To Philip.
And hello, my name is Philip Katz. I'm glad to be here with you today. I'm just over a year with Actum Digital, and at Actum I manage a division related to content operations and emailing support for our clients. Looking forward to today's agenda.
Perfect, thank you. And I think the audience already recognizes a lot of experience within our panelists. Phrase Actum Digital. Tobias, would you give us a quick introduction what Phrase is all about?
Sure, well, thank you, Janis. So Phrase is a leading translation technology provider in the space of localization, obviously. We're supporting translation localization needs for some of the most well-known brands in the industry across different markets. And are very strong when it comes to innovative solutions around machine translation and automation, including the use of AI technology. Some of that we'll uncover, throughout the discussions here. But feel free to check us out and learn more.
Thanks, Tobias. And Radibor, would you give us a brief introduction about Actum Digital?
Sure. Actum Digital is digital agency. We operate mainly in DACH and Benelux with kind of clients in the US and UK. And our services are spread from web development over the application development to the CRMs and supporting tools. So we cover nearly whole digital stack of our customers. And typically we have a very strong background in manufacturing and finance industry. So we know how difficult sometimes it is to build content, localize the content for companies like Allianz, like BMW, or other clients from manufacturing. So because the localization is always part of our work, we are partnering to Phrase to cover this part of our business.
Perfect, thank you, Radibor. And in terms of the topic, you heard now localization a couple of times, the expression. So it's not only about translating content, it's really about localization. What does that mean? So make your content as appealing as possible to your audience. And why is that localization so essential? Ask Nimsy. 9 out of 10 global users will ignore your product if it's not in their native language. So obviously you're missing out a huge business opportunity, and language can unlock this opportunity. So we have a couple of stats here for our marketers, especially. 74% of internet users are non-native English speakers. So expanding your business means expanding your language coverage. 65% of internet users are worldwide users, prefer their content in the language they speak. And 81% of buyers, that's of course very relevant for us, are more likely to buy products with pre-sales, interactive marketing or contents, product informations in their language. So it is essential, but how can you approach localization? There are various ways to start. And Ratibor, would you give us a bit of your experience, how to start with local agencies and translators?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, starting with local agencies and translators, it's a meaningful way if you have small operations, or if you are not in a pressure because of deadlines and timing of your operations. So it's usually cost effective, but you soon come into the problems because you have to take care by yourself about the project management of the localization and translations. You typically don't have support of a strong team or technologies on the background. And very often you have to face the situation when people are changing, freelancers and local agencies are changing people in their team. So you constantly need to take care about quality of the content and translation, because you don't have standard language, you don't have standard dictionaries. You need to teach new people about your company, about your products, and so on. So for some operations, it's good. For others, typically the bigger ones, it's not as a good approach.
Thank you, Ratibor, and what a great transition to the next global agencies and translators. Philip, would you give us a bit of insight?
Yes, sure. Thank you. Talking about local agencies and translators, if you decide to go with a global agency, the job is most likely to get done by the local freelancers anyway. But the single big advantage is that your contact will be single. So there will be most likely a project manager or account manager responsible for handling your requests and distributing the workload. So this will make your life a lot easier. Also, with global agencies, you typically have really wide choice of languages you can translate to, and they can handle large amounts of translations at a very quick time. And it's also very easy with them to scale up and down according to your exact needs. So if we're talking about some large one-off translation projects, global agency would typically be a very smart choice. On the other hand, as with any global agency, it can become quite expensive to work with. And sometimes even the consistency might be a topic because of the large amount of freelancers they're working with. And as a transition to next topic, there will most likely be some translation technology in place with global agencies, which is good because it could bring your costs down over time, but it sometimes can be a pain point in dealing who owns the translation memory. So over to you, Tobias.
Thank you, Philip. Exactly, Tobias. Translation technology and machine translation.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so there are many ways you can go about translation. Of course, you can start with generic machine translation engines. Many of you probably know what I'm talking about if you've browsed the web and used MT engines out there. Of course, you can subscribe to them as well, right? So there's ways to easily break into the market of translation these days. And as you go and mature, as Philip mentioned as well, you will probably want to look at sophisticated TMS solutions or something that allows you to streamline your translation through a platform, right? And using a vendor, large provider, or multiple providers. When you're in that situation, you're going to look at technology such as that provided by us, but that will lead you to ultimately be able to control the content that you've translated and invested in. So exactly what Philip mentioned as well is you may want to store that content in what we call a translation memory, so you can reuse that content as you go and produce more pieces of content, let's say marketing related or otherwise, right? And ultimately effectively bring down the cost of translation over time. And that all, of course, integrated with, let's say machine translation. So again, you can streamline your production, use machine translation, use human translators, and use translation memory technology, as well as terminology databases, all in one system, controlling your quality and controlling your cost.
Perfect. Tobias, thank you for the explanation. All right, yachting.com. Philip, you brought us an example like from real life. Philip, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Glad to introduce. Yachting.com has been on the market for now over 20 years, I believe, and they offer a wide selection of services. So if you're into boat charter, or if you want to take skipper exams, or if you want to organize any event related to this yachting passion, this is probably the place where you want to be. So originally they started in 4 languages. About a year ago, they decided to invest more in new content created, but they also wanted to come to new markets and extended their reach. The obvious goal was to score better on the search results and to bring more organic traffic to their website. And they're now using machine translation for 26 languages. 9 of these languages are what we call the main languages, and there are 18 minor languages. They have not yet translated all of their websites, so only certain sections are translated, but we can already see some quite impressive results from the traffic to their website. This picture, it shows the 16-month history of traffic for the main group of languages, which is 9. And you can see that over time, the figures for both organic impressions and organic clicks received have doubled if we compare year-on-year situation. Obviously, this is not just caused by the translation itself, but also into the investment into content creation based on some search engine optimization tools. So this is the result of the main languages, which was achieved since April last year when this new content strategy was introduced. Only for these 9 languages, the sitemap is created because we want to make sure that as many sites as possible are indexed by Google, and the remaining 18 languages we take as a benefit. So this means we want to focus on these key markets, and Google only can index a certain amount of pages. So we want to tell them where to look. But on the next slide, thank you. this is the contribution of additional 18 languages. And if you look at it, it is additional 50% of traffic and additional 60% of clicks received. And these sites are not even included in the sitemap. On top of this, there is a significant contribution to overall Google search value of the Yachting.com domain, because they use this single name domain. So as a result, from traffic and clicks coming from these 18 additional languages, the domain itself and the main languages score better on search, meaning that if there was some investment already made into the translation tool, into the technology setup, and obviously into the content resources, adding those extra languages comes at very little cost compared to the interesting value they bring. And it can also reveal some hidden potential in markets where you include the language for, and you do not expect great results. Sometimes you might be surprised what a great interest is coming from those markets, and it can bring interesting results even on revenues. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Very interesting. So thank you. And coming back to a discussion, the whole panelists. So how do you prepare your global expansion? Philip, you mentioned Yachting.com. So how do you select your markets, Philip?
It's typically a combination of market research and digital research. So you look at each individual market and try to define, if there is existing business, what size of the market is, how many people live there, what would be the buying potential. You of course have a look at your competition and analyze their presence and activities on individual markets. And obviously you can also look at your existing website and analyze traffic, if it's coming, where it's coming from, where you get orders from already, even if you do not use that language, and could be an interesting sign of interest. Sometimes it's really worth run a SEO analysis of the important keywords and analyze the search volumes in individual markets, and that can indicate quite significant markets of importance for you.
And Tobias, you're speaking with a lot of clients of Phrase. So how do you understand the local needs?
Yeah, so good question on that end, really to understand your user base or understand the market on that sense of localization, it's either demand, right? So you already have customers in potential regions that are reaching out and requesting translation, or it becomes really clear that you are having a need for translation, maybe through your products, and sort of, by looking at where the user's coming from. You can probe through, let's say, international trade shows where you go out and venture and see what the appetite is for, let's say, your products in region, and also understanding sort of the needs around localization in those regions. And sort of the acceptance level, right? If you don't localize the content that you're providing around your products, and then maybe perform some small scale testing, right? So understand how the market will react when you actually put out some content in another language. So like what Philip showed earlier, right? We can see that impressions went up, clicks went up, and there's definitely driving more traffic to the site in that case. Similar situation where you could test the market and understand if changing over to a target locale or target translation will actually get you increased impressions or more traction.
More traction, and then the measurements you were talking about, Tobias, I assume produce a lot of data. Ratibor, is there some like how to track local data and act on data? Some tips?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, tracking data, as both guys already mentioned, is important part, because you need to decide what to do So tracking the data is easy part. You have basically tools like Google Analytics or similar tools, and some tools for SEO optimization or SEO analytics. Again, there are many options what to use, and actually it doesn't matter much which one you choose. What is much more important is how you work with the results, or how you decide what you decide to do with your data. And typically data serves to you to optimize the process of marketing and sales. So when the user comes to your website or any landing page, so it helps you to optimize the process. And it's well known, and everybody do this. What is less known, or there is a less focus, is that data can give you very important hints how to optimize your content, what content to bring into front, and what is interesting and important for users. So SEO data can give you a very good information about search terms, about the topics which are interesting for your customers, and then you start building the proper content. That's how it works. And of course, it differs from country to country, from place to place. So you need to take care about this dimension as well. So data from, for example, Czech website are only partially useful for German website, because it will help you to optimize the workflow probably, but will not tell you what is important for your customers.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of importance, Philip, can you elaborate a bit more in depth about how to prepare your content and websites then for localization?
Well, that's a tricky question, I think. For content, it's really up to you how far or how deep you decide to go, or how far you want to go. Even though there is a small dependence on the nature of business, because there might be some existing restrictions or regulations in place. But outside of that, it's really up to you. At Yachting, for example, the first group of 9 major languages is also post-edited by proofreading to make sure that everything is fine, but the rest is pure machine translation. An important part, of course, is the terminology or the industry keywords, and you need to address this in every single language to make sure that the translated content scores good on the search in local markets. So in order to address that, if you have an opportunity to look at some sort of technology that offers working with glossaries or term base, then it's a clear way to go there. If you look on the website, on the other hand, I think there will be strong dependence on the technology stack you're using, and especially on the CMS. Because different CMSs can offer, different variety for automation. If I go back to the Yachting case, we're happy that it's built on Kentico CMS, and Kentico offers really wide choice and plenty of options for integration, automation, and workflow definitions. So if you really, with such type of technology stack, invest in the setup, then adding extra languages does not virtually cost anything.
Understood. And Tobias, I might think I know your answer. So Ratibor, what kind of technology do I need?
Regarding the technology, you basically need there are 3 parts you need to cover. First is some project management technology. And as Philip mentioned, this part may happen in a specific tool for translation, or it may happen in CMS like Kentico or Content AI. So that's first thing. Second thing, you need to store your data somewhere. So you need some single point of truth for everything. So some specific asset management tool like digital asset management, like translation memory, these type of tools. And third field is automation. If you are working with large amount of data, you would like to automate, to be faster, quicker. So typically this automation may happen again inside of each of the tools, because like Content AI, for example, has a lot of possibilities for automation, or it may happen between the tools, because if your digital stack is a little bit large one, there are many tools, so you need to cover integration somehow. You can use Microsoft Power Apps, for example, or other type of no-code, low-code approaches. So you need to cover these three things: project management, data, a single point of truth, the data saving, and automation. So these are the three areas you need to cover.
Thank you, Ratibor. And that all sounds quite easy and seamless, or is it? So what kind of obstacles might you face, and how do you address them? Maybe Tobias, how, for instance, would we handle budget constraints?
Yeah, so budget constraints, as you heard Philip mention earlier, for instance, in the case of Yakting, right? Some languages are using machine translation and post-editing while others aren't, right? So this is a good approach. As one, you can use just raw machine translation where you're maybe probing markets or it's not your hot market, right? And you have main markets maybe where you put more care into translation. And invest more money, therefore. So having a machine translation post-editing effort in those regions. Alternatively, you can also look at, page analytics and decide based on visitors to certain content, if it's a website, for instance, do I translate that and post-edit it, or just do raw machine translation if I maybe have only one to a few visitors, and focus my investment really on the content that has more, more visitors, more impressions. So that's one way to do it.
Yeah, and makes a lot of sense. Thanks for sharing, Tobias. Often my clients ask me for a return on invest. Maybe the audience is aware of that as well, ROI. So maybe Philip, for you, how would you track localization ROI for stakeholders and of course to get their buy-in?
Well, this would typically be comparison of pre and post localization data. And I believe that the parameters you will be watching will be very different based on the brand position on the market. If it's like a mature market that you have been present for a long time, or if it's some maybe a testing opportunity like Tobias mentioned a couple minutes ago. So if we are looking at the new markets, it's probably going to be parameters more brand awareness or brand consideration related, like you're going to look, the number of impressions or engagement clicks or clicks you're getting, you'll be looking at bounce rate, etc. While on the more established markets, you're probably going to follow more like conversion parameters, or even you're going to be looking at year-on-year business result to see the effect that you had. Obviously, it's hard to get a buy-in on, post-action results, but I think we have, benchmarks, and you can make estimation based on some analysis, maybe of the search volume, and you can estimate based on the benchmark for your click-through rates or even conversion rates to get a buy-in from the key stakeholders.
To calculate that magical return on invest, right?
Exactly.
Yes. In terms of obstacles, Tobias, we discussed that the other day. legal and compliance. When we talk about translation, of course, we are talking about different markets. So can you share a bit about your experience in terms of legal and compliance obstacles?
Yeah, so you could have varied, or say, hurdles that you face depending on the region market you're trying to get into, right? So a good example always is Canada and Quebec, right? You need to have French and English, and in many cases, French really has to be the predominant language when displayed, right? Specifically banner ads and things like that. Always, your marketing billboards and things like that, right? You definitely need to focus on that, otherwise you get in trouble. Other areas, maybe if you're selling consumer products or something in market and you need to worry about compliance around maybe certain certifications that your product needs to have that meet local requirements, right? In that sense, you need to be, of course, aware of those. There are other challenges maybe by region, thinking about China, for instance, as one of them, and understanding their legal requirements around marketing, exaggeration, making false claims, or overhyping your product, right? Those are things that work in certain regions or sort of are permissible, if you will, but aren't really looked at kindly in other regions where you might actually get into some kind of legal conflict, right? If you're not very careful with your wording. So those are some good examples.
Yeah, great examples. And in terms of issues, we are well aware of working with a lot of technology, and this goes to Ratibor. Are there any technology issues you might face?
Yeah. there are many technology issues you can run into. I would just continue what Tobias mentioned with an example how important is choose right technologies. And because Tobias was speaking about a specific part of work, many people think that maps are same all over the world. But when you are working on technologies, you have to choose carefully which tool, technological tool, as a map tool, are you using. So Pakistan, India, Arab Peninsula, and other parts of the world, there are not clear boundaries between the countries. So it may be very easy to run into the problem because you choose wrong tool for your maps. But your question was probably a little bit broader. So typical technological problems comes with complexity of your digital stack. So you have CXM, you have CMS, you have CRM, you have field support, many tools you need to combine together. These tools are some changing every 3 years, some are changing every 5 or 7 years. So you are in constant turmoil. Somebody is pushing new technological part into your digital stack, and you need to take care about this. So you need to think twice before you decide which feature of the technology of a specific tool you will use for what purpose. Because otherwise, you will end up with very complex stack and expensive stack of technologies, and it will be more and more complicated to work with it. So simplicity here is top priority, and your technology stack needs to follow this priority.
Costs, classic, right, in terms of obstacles, of course. Tobias, from your experience, are there any other obstacles you might consider or should be aware of, at least?
Yes, so there, of course, there's varied obstacles you may face. So as Ratibor actually said, and I might just lean into that as well, is there's some political sensitivity you might reach, right? So you already set the stage nicely there with the sort of borders, right, of countries. You know, in some areas, of course, there can be considerable political tensions, right, versus, you know, around boundaries or who owns what or what region or is part of another country, right? And there may be conflict and different beliefs. Also, of course, we all know the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, right? And being sensitive around those issues and who you market your products to may have an impact on your brand globally, right? Depending on how people feel about conflict and or certain political ongoing tensions, let's say. And culturally, of course, that's another obstacle. You need to understand your market, need to understand whether your product, whether what you're bringing to market is viable for that market, has actually an adoption there, and whether it will be something that goes in that market. It's acceptable or it has acceptance ultimately, right? And then also whether you need to translate your content, right? Sometimes, like I mentioned, you may get away with just using, let's say, English as a source language or another language in another country, and it can be accepted. In other cases, it's damaging and may actually yield subpar results. Good example, of course, for cultural adoption ultimately is maybe the case of Starbucks, going into Italy, a region where coffee is basically a sacred thing, right? And we all know how Italian people tend to feel about their coffee, right? And here comes an American corporation that wants to enter the market in Italy, right? And that to do this very, very carefully. Now, I'm not going to say they were overly successful, right? I can't say that because, I mean, many eyes of the Italian culture, maybe they aren't still not accepted, but they were very careful with how they approached this topic. And I think that shows that they were thinking about the issue, right? And that's, I think, the more important takeaway here. So in their case, they were looking at sourcing beans, for instance, locally, and pastries, for instance, they sell in their shop in Milan also, and even the location they chose for the first store is very carefully chosen as well, for one that would probably be more accepting in all of Italy.
Yes, and exactly that awareness, right, Tobias? I think that's the key takeaway, that there is some caveat with all of these markets, and being aware of it is very important. In terms of all the abbreviation we were using, I just remind you, we do have Slido. So we would now transition to our Q&A phase. So please open Slido. You find the QR code here. The event code is #L10N. That's kind of pro tip. That's localization. And please submit your questions. Within Slido, you can also upvote questions. So if somebody asked already, just click on upvote. It shows that it is an important topic to you as well. And of course, I just want to remind you what happens tomorrow. So tomorrow in your inbox, you will find our Going Global Prep checklist. I know we tackled a lot of content. So tomorrow in your inbox, together with the recording of the webinar, you will find the Going Global Prep checklist. All right, shall we transition to Slido? Looking very much forward to your questions. And you may also add the panelist, of course, who should answer the question if you want a dedicated answer. Maria Schubert, how can I best reuse my translations? Maybe Tobias, would you start?
Yes, so translation reuse, of course, ideally through a translation management system in storing them into what we call a translation memory database. So as you translate content, particular content that's also reviewed by a human being, if you're using machine translation to begin with, can be stored in such databases, organized into different topics, let's say if it's marketing content, legal content, and so on, and then appropriately reused every time you have new content for translation. So if you have a new web page with similar content than what you've translated before, those translations can be re-leveraged and, of course, improve consistency, quality, your branding and voice of tone of voice, right? Because you're starting to store that library, and of course drives down the cost because linguists don't have to retranslate everything from scratch.
Thanks, Tobias. Maria, I hope that was the answer to your question. The Thomas is asking and got upvoted twice. I'd like to ask Phrase, how can you evaluate machine translation engine quality? Tobias again.
Sure. Okay. So with that, you have multiple options. You can use, of course, out of production cycle and evaluation. So let's say you have a model, you're going to pick some content, you have that translated, and then you post evaluation, meaning somebody runs post editing, or you compare it to a pristine translated copy of the same kind, and you will then run metrics. Some metrics that are typically used are TER, CHR3, Blue, Comet. You may have heard of Meteor. So there's a number of metrics out there. Some are better, some are worse, or use a combination of them just to determine what the quality looks like. Other parts you can do are you can run this also in cycle. So as you go through translation for a platform like Phrase, you can capture this data automatically. And if you use that data later, you can do that same evaluation, right? And see kind of like what the quality of the initial MT was. Or preemptively, if you use technology called machine translation quality estimation, where before a linguist touches it, an AI system can give you predictive scoring around the quality of the MT output, right? And that gives you an idea of whether the content isn't even viable, if it's ready to just be released raw to a certain market, maybe, or if you want to post-edit it.
MTQE. Thank you, Tobias. And I think the next question from Akram, I hope I pronounced that correctly. How about MT use case? So where does it make sense? For instance, UI, legal, marketing. Legal might be tricky. Philip.
Well, I think this relates to what I was saying about the content preparation, and obviously there are areas where there will be some restrictions or regulation, typically legal or finance stuff. So obviously, marketing would probably be the field of choice for maybe at least testing out the machine translation. As in most cases, this will not require like deep post-editing or proofreading.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Akram, I hope that answered the question. If not, of course, please reach out to us. We do have a second webinar where we are focusing and deep diving on some of the contents we touched base upon today. So March 28th, watch the space. The next question from Robert: when localization into several languages, for which do you not have local teams in the target markets? What is the best practice to ensure quality? Ratibor, if I may.
Yeah, sure. The first step here is to define what quality level you need. So I saw cases where the quality level was at the level of machine translation, and of course there were other cases where the translation needs to be absolutely punctual and correct. So first step. Decide what type of quality you want, what level of quality you want. Second, decide what the process will be, content creation process or translation process, because you probably translate step by step. Some parts of your content are more important than others. And based on this, it's easy to set up a proper team and workflow. So that's how we typically approach it.
Mm-hmm. Prioritization, making sure you have the quality in check and know what kind of quality you want. Thank you, Ratibor. The next question is from Zar, and that's the brand tone and tone of voice, consistent throughout and across languages. Maybe Tobias, if I may.
Okay, yeah, so again, via platform, or even if you don't yet have a platform, you could establish terminology, right? So it can be as low tech as you want, but be able to share, say, predefined terminology translations that can be, your branding, specific branding translations, your keywords for your websites and things like that, right? So you want to make sure that that's consistent throughout, and then having linguists have access to that data is really important. Other tools that are used in this industry, of course, are style guides and branding guides, right? To actually create those, make them or build them out for target locales as well, not just for English, right? You often see that being done for your source locale, but you want to actually have that for target locales as well, so you can carry out again in a consistent manner and have a rule book to go by.
All right, we would have time for one more question. We will definitely circle back on the other question. Not sure about the market share in terms of AI and how it will progress throughout the end of year, but maybe we can give some advice there. But Nina, you asked about help with improved SEO content. Philip, you touched base upon that topic. Maybe can you give Nina your top 2 tips?
Yeah, I think from the localization perspective, you really need to look at each individual market for the proper SEO analysis. So you need to come up with some term base or glossary, how your important keywords get translated to each and every language that you intend to use, and then run an analysis for each of those markets and make sure you use the proper translation in the, not content creation, but in the localization process. And you probably will need a native speaker for each of those markets.
All right, Nina, I hope that answered your question. Philip, thank you. And Christian, Franz, we will make sure to send something out that will answer the market share of AI and how it will probably progress throughout the year. I can only say thank you to these wonderful panelists, Tobias, Ratibor, Philip. You're legends. March 28th, if you want to hear more of the topics we just discussed, March 28th, watch this space. And without further ado, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thanks to the audience and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.